At Christmas dinner, my mother called me a burden while praising my perfect brother. 3 weeks later, my father discovered someone had stolen his identity for a $300,000 loan. If you want to see how this family drama unfolds, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking stories. The snow was falling heavily outside my childhood home in Denver, Colorado, creating that picture-perfect Christmas scene that belonged on greeting cards. Inside, the warmth from the fireplace couldn't melt the ice that had formed between me and my family over the years. I sat at the mahogany dining table my parents had owned since before I was born, picking at the glazed ham while listening to my mother gush about my older brother Dylan for the 100th time that evening. "Dylan just got another promotion at the investment firm," Mom announced, her voice carrying that familiar tone of pride that never seemed to surface when talking about me. "Senior vice president now. Can you believe it? Only 28 years old and already making more money than most people see in a lifetime." Dad nodded approvingly from the head of the table, carving another slice of turkey. "That's my boy. Always knew he had it in him. Remember when he was valedictorian? I told everyone at the office that kid was going places." I took a sip of wine, feeling the familiar knot forming in my stomach. At 26, I had my own accomplishments. I was a registered nurse at Denver General, working 12-hour shifts in the ICU, saving lives on a daily basis. But somehow, that never seemed to measure up in their eyes. Dylan worked in finance, wore expensive suits, and drove a BMW. In their world, that translated to success, while my scrubs and sensible shoes apparently translated to disappointment. "Emma, you're being awfully quiet," Dylan said, flashing me that charming smile that had gotten him out of trouble since we were kids. He was handsome in that clean-cut, all-American way that mothers loved. Brown hair perfectly styled, green eyes that sparkled with confidence, and a jaw that could have been carved from marble. "How's the hospital treating you?" Before I could answer, Mom jumped in. "Oh, she's still doing that nurse thing. I keep telling her she should go back to school, become a doctor like we always planned. Remember, Emma, you used to say you wanted to be a surgeon when you grew up." "That was when I was 8, Mom. People change." I set down my fork, feeling the familiar defensiveness creeping into my voice. "And nursing isn't just that nurse thing. I help people recover from the worst days of their lives. I hold hands with dying patients. I save lives." Dad cleared his throat, that sound he made when he was about to say something he thought was profound, but usually just came across as dismissive. "Honey, we know you help people, but helping isn't the same as leading. Dylan here, he's making decisions that affect entire companies. He's building something." "I am building something," I protested. "I'm building a career I'm passionate about. I'm making a difference." Dylan reached over and patted my hand in that patronizing way that made my skin crawl. "Emma, nobody's saying your job isn't important. But let's be realistic here. You're not exactly setting the world on fire, are you? I mean, when was the last time you got a promotion? Or even a raise?" The condescension in his voice was like a slap across the face. I pulled my hand away from his touch, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "Some of us don't measure success by dollar signs, Dylan." "Maybe you should," Mom chimed in, her voice taking on that sharp edge I knew so well. "Because at your age, you should be thinking about your future. About settling down, starting a family. How are you supposed to attract a decent man living in that tiny apartment, driving that old Honda? Men want stability, Emma. They want a woman who has her life together." I felt something snap inside me. Years of being compared to Dylan, years of having my choices questioned and my achievements minimized, all came rushing to the surface. Maybe I don't want to attract the kind of man who judges a woman by her car or her apartment size. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "Don't you dare take that tone with your mother. She's only trying to help you." "Help me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "By telling me everything I do is wrong? By constantly comparing me to Dylan like I'm some kind of failure?" "Well, if the shoe fits," Mom said, her voice cold as the snow outside. She looked at me with those steel gray eyes, the same eyes I'd inherited but somehow looked so much harder in her face. "Emma, You are 26 years old. You're single. You live alone. You work a job that barely pays the bills, and you seem perfectly content to stay that way. Meanwhile, your brother owns a beautiful condo in downtown Denver, drives a luxury car, and just bought a vacation home in Aspen. Good for him, I said through gritted teeth. I'm happy for Dylan's success. I really am. But that doesn't make my life a failure. Dylan leaned back in his chair, that smug expression on his face that I'd grown to hate. Emma, I think what Mom and Dad are trying to say is that you could have so much more if you just applied yourself. I mean, look at me. I started at the bottom and worked my way up. It's called ambition. Ambition? I stood up so fast my chair almost fell over. You think I don't have ambition? I worked my way through nursing school while waitressing 3 jobs. I studied while you were out partying in college. I chose a career where I actually help people instead of just shuffling money around. Shuffling money around? Dylan's voice rose, his perfect composure finally cracking. I manage investment portfolios worth millions of dollars. I make financial decisions that secure people's retirements, their children's college funds. Don't diminish what I do just because you're jealous of my success. I'm not jealous, I shot back. I'm tired of being made to feel like less than because I chose a different path. Mom set down her wine glass with enough force to make it ring against the table. You know what, Emma? Maybe you should be jealous. Maybe a little healthy competition would motivate you to do something with your life besides complain about how unfair everything is. The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to support me no matter what. Instead, I saw judgment, disappointment, and a complete inability to see me for who I really was. You want to know what's unfair? I said, my voice eerily calm now. What's unfair is sitting here listening to you tear me down while building Dylan up like he's some kind of saint. What's unfair is never being good enough, no matter what I accomplish. Dad's face was red now. Whether from anger or the wine, I couldn't tell. Emma, we're not tearing you down. We're trying to wake you up. You have potential, but you're wasting it. Dylan didn't get where he is by accepting mediocrity. And then Mom delivered the final blow. She looked directly at me, her expression cold and unyielding, and said the words that would echo in my head for weeks to come. You know what, Emma? You're just a burden. You always have been. She paused, letting the words sink in like poison. From the moment you were born, you've been nothing but problems and disappointments. At least Dylan makes this family proud. Dylan actually laughed. He threw back his head and laughed like Mom had just told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. At least I leave this family proud, he echoed, raising his wine glass in a mock toast. I stood there for a moment, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. 26 years of feeling like an outsider in my own family suddenly made perfect sense. I wasn't their daughter who'd chosen a different path. I was their burden, their disappointment, their failure. Without saying another word, I walked to the entryway, grabbed my coat from the closet, and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear Dad calling my name, his voice carrying a note of regret, but I didn't turn around. Mom's voice followed me, sharp and defensive. Let her go, Robert. Maybe some time alone will help her grow up. I stepped out into the Colorado winter, the cold air hitting my face like a physical slap. The snow was coming down harder now, and I had to brush it off my windshield before getting into my old Honda, the one Mom had just mocked. As I drove away from the house where I'd grown up, I caught a glimpse of Dylan in the living room window, probably already moving on to dessert and more stories about his amazing life. 3 weeks passed in a blur of 12-hour shifts and the kind of emotional numbness that comes after a devastating blow. I threw myself into work with an intensity that worried my colleagues. Sarah, my closest friend at the hospital, cornered me in the break room on a particularly busy Thursday. Emma, you've been different since Christmas. Want to talk about it? She sat down across from me, her dark eyes full of concern. Sarah was one of those people who seemed to see right through whatever facade you tried to put up. I stirred my coffee absently, watching the cream swirl in lazy patterns. Family stuff. Nothing I haven't dealt with before. Bullshit, she said bluntly, which was why I loved her. Sarah didn't do sugarcoating. You've been working double shifts, you look like you haven't slept in days, and yesterday I saw you crying in supply closet B. So try again. I sighed, suddenly feeling exhausted. My mom called me a burden at Christmas dinner, said I always have been. Dylan, my perfect brother, thought it was hilarious. Sarah's expression darkened. Jesus, Emma, that's awful. What did you do? I left, didn't say a word, just walked out. I took a sip of coffee, trying to ignore how it tasted like cardboard. Haven't spoken to any of them since. Good for you, Sarah said firmly. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is remove toxic people from your life, even if they're family. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my stomach drop. In the 3 weeks since Christmas, he'd called twice, leaving voicemails I hadn't returned. Mom and Dylan hadn't called at all. You should answer it, Sarah said gently. Maybe he's calling to apologize. I stared at the phone for another ring before reluctantly sliding my finger across the screen. Hello, Dad? Emma? His voice sounded strained, older somehow. Thank God you answered. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. There was something in his tone that made me sit up straighter. What's going on? Did you... He paused, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. Did you take out a loan using my social security number? The question hit me like a physical blow. What? No, Dad, why would you even ask me that? Because someone did. His voice was shaking now. Someone applied for a $300,000 business loan using my name, my social security number, my employment information. The bank called today because the first payment is overdue. I felt the blood drain from my face. $300,000. That was more money than I'd see in 5 years of working at the hospital. Dad, I would never do something like that. You have to know that. I want to believe you, Emma, I do. But you were so angry when you left on Christmas, and you haven't spoken to us since. And frankly, you're the only one who would have access to my personal information. The accusation stung worse than anything Mom had said at Christmas. Are you serious right now? You think I'm capable of stealing from you? I don't know what to think, he admitted, his voice breaking. This loan was taken out 2 weeks ago, right after Christmas. The timing? He trailed off, but I knew what he was thinking. The timing makes me look guilty, I finished for him. Dad, I swear to you on everything I hold sacred, I did not take out that loan. I would never do that to you. There was silence on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head. Finally, he spoke again. If it wasn't you, then who? Who else would have access to my information? The answer was so obvious I couldn't believe he hadn't thought of it himself. Dad, who else lives in your house? Who else has access to your mail, your files, your personal documents? Another long pause. Emma, you can't be suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just asking who had the opportunity. Your brother would never do something like this, he said, but there was less certainty in his voice than there had been moments before. Dylan has his own money. He just bought a vacation home, for crying out loud. Why would he need to steal from me? Maybe that's exactly why, I said quietly. Dad, how do you think he afforded that vacation home? The condo downtown? The BMW? Does his salary really cover all of that? Of course it does. He's a senior vice president at a major investment firm. Have you ever seen a pay stub? Do you actually know what he makes? Dad was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. What are you saying, Emma? I'm saying maybe the golden boy isn't as golden as everyone thinks. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. Part of me was satisfied that Dylan's perfect facade might finally be cracking, but another part of me hurt for my father, who was about to have his world turned upside down. I can't believe Dylan would do this to us, Dad said, but I could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. He's always been so responsible, so successful. Dad, successful people don't usually need to take out fraudulent loans, and responsible people definitely don't steal from their parents. I softened my voice, remembering that this was my father I was talking to, not just someone defending Dylan. Look, I know this is hard to accept, but maybe it's time to take a closer look at Dylan's finances. How am I supposed to do that? I can't just demand to see his bank statements. You could start by asking him directly about the loan. See how he reacts. Dad sighed heavily. Emma, if you're right about this, if Dylan really did take out this loan, what am I supposed to do? He's my son. So am I said simply. The words hung between us for a moment, carrying the weight of 26 years of feeling like the lesser child, the disappointment, the burden. Dad seemed to understand what I was really saying because his voice was thick with emotion when he responded. You're right. You are my daughter, and I owe you an apology for even thinking you could do something like this. I should have known better. Thank you, I said, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. Emma, will you come over tonight? I think it's time your mother and I had a serious conversation with Dylan. I hesitated. The thought of facing my family again, especially after Mom's brutal words at Christmas, made my stomach churn. But this was bigger than my hurt feelings. This was about my father potentially losing $300,000 because of his golden child's deception. I'll be there at 7, I said finally. Thank you. And Emma, I love you. I should have said that more often. After I hung up, Sarah was staring at me with wide eyes. Holy shit, Emma. Did your brother really steal $300,000 from your parents? I think so, I said, still processing the phone call. And I think I'm about to watch my family fall apart. The same house that had felt so unwelcoming 3 weeks ago now looked different as I pulled into the driveway. The Christmas decorations were still up, but they seemed faded somehow, like the magic had gone out of them. Dad met me at the door, and I was shocked by how much older he looked. His hair seemed grayer, his face more lined, as if the stress of the past few days had aged him years. Emma, thank you for coming, he said, pulling me into a hug that felt different from any hug he'd given me before. It was desperate, grateful, and tinged with regret. Where's Mom? I asked as I hung up my coat. In the living room. She's processing everything. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as his way of dealing with stress. I told her about the loan, about our conversation. She's having a hard time accepting that Dylan might be involved. We walked into the living room where Mom was sitting on the couch, staring at her hands. She looked up when I entered, and for the first time in years, I saw vulnerability in her eyes instead of judgment. Emma, she said softly, your father told me about the phone call, about what you think Dylan did. It's not what I think, Mom. It's what makes the most sense. I sat down in the chair across from her, the same chair I'd occupied during countless lectures about my life choices. Someone with access to Dad's personal information took out that loan. I was here for maybe 4 hours on Christmas Day. Dylan lives here. Mom shook her head. But why would he do it? He has a good job, a nice income. Does he? I asked gently. When was the last time either of you actually verified that? When did you last see a pay stub, a tax return, anything that proves he makes what he claims to make? The look that passed between my parents told me everything I needed to know. They'd taken Dylan's word for everything, never questioning, never verifying. Their golden boy had told them he was successful, and they'd believed it without reservation. He should be home soon, Dad said, glancing at his watch. I asked him to come over for dinner. I didn't tell him why. As if summoned by his words, we heard Dylan's BMW pull into the driveway. A few minutes later, he walked through the front door with that same confident stride I'd always envied. He was dressed in his usual expensive suit, his hair perfectly styled, every inch the successful businessman our parents believed him to be. Hey, family, he called out cheerfully as he entered the living room. His smile faltered slightly when he saw me. Emma, I didn't know you'd be here. Surprise, I said dryly. Dylan looked between our parents, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Is everything okay? Dad, you sounded weird on the phone. Dad cleared his throat and I could see his hands shaking slightly. Dylan, I need to ask you about something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, Dad. What's up? 3 weeks ago, someone took out a $300,000 loan using my personal information, my social security number, my employment history, everything. Dad's voice was steady, but I could see the effort it was costing him. The bank called because the first payment is overdue. For just a split second, Dylan's mask slipped. I saw panic flash across his face before he quickly recovered, pasting on an expression of shock and concern. What? Dad? That's terrible. Have you called the police? This is identity theft. Someone could ruin your credit, your reputation. That's what I thought too, Dad said slowly. The question is, who had access to my information? Dylan looked genuinely confused, but I'd seen him act before. He'd been perfecting this innocent expression since childhood. I don't know. Could it have been a data breach at your work? Or maybe someone got into your mail? Maybe, Dad said. But Dylan, I need to ask you directly. Did you take out this loan? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Dylan's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, hurt, anger, and finally, indignation. Dad, how can you even ask me that? I'm your son. I would never steal from you. He looked around the room at each of us. Is this why Emma's here? Did she put this idea in your head? Don't blame me for this, I said firmly. I'm just asking the obvious questions. The obvious questions? Dylan's voice was rising now. The obvious question is why you're so eager to throw me under the bus. Are you that jealous of my success? Your success? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Dylan, what exactly do you do at work? Specifically? He blinked, caught off guard by the question. I manage investment portfolios. I told you that at Christmas. For who? What clients? What's the name of your firm again? Meridian Financial, he said quickly. And your title is Senior Vice President? That's right. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Let me just look up Meridian Financial and see if they have a senior vice president named Dylan Richardson. The color drained from his face. Emma, what are you doing? I'm fact-checking, I said, still typing. After a few moments, I looked up at him. Interesting. Meridian Financial doesn't have a senior vice president named Dylan Richardson. In fact, they don't have anyone named Dylan Richardson working there at all. The silence in the room was deafening. Mom was staring at Dylan with an expression I'd never seen before, a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Dad looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. That's impossible, Dylan said, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe their website isn't updated. Or maybe you don't actually work there, I said quietly. Of course I work there. Dylan's composure was cracking now, desperation creeping into his voice. Emma, you're being ridiculous. Just because you can't find me on some website doesn't mean anything. Then prove it, I challenged. Show us a pay stub. Show us your employee ID. Call your boss. I don't have to prove anything to you, he snapped. You're just trying to deflect attention from yourself. You were angry at Christmas, angry enough to storm out. Maybe you decided to get revenge by stealing from Dad? Dylan. Dad's voice cut through the argument like a knife. Show me your last pay stub. Dad, come on. You don't actually believe her, do you? Show me the pay stub, son. Dylan looked around the room desperately, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. I don't have it with me. It's at my apartment. Then call your boss, Mom said suddenly. Her voice was quiet but firm. Call him right now and let us talk to him. It's after hours, Mom. He won't answer. Try anyway, she insisted. Dylan pulled out his phone with shaking hands and pretended to dial. After a moment, he held it to his ear. It's going straight to voicemail, he said. I held out my hand. Let me see the phone. What? No? Emma, this is ridiculous. Let me see the phone, Dylan. He clutched it to his chest like it was a lifeline. I'm not giving you my phone. Dad stood up, his face harder than I'd ever seen it. Dylan, give your sister the phone. With no other choice, Dylan reluctantly handed it over. I looked at the screen and felt my heart sink for my parents' sake. He hadn't called anyone. The phone showed no recent calls, no outgoing number. He didn't call anyone, I said softly. The phone shows no recent calls. Mom made a sound like she'd been hit. Dad sat down heavily in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. Dylan, Mom whispered. Tell us the truth, please. And finally, Dylan's perfect facade crumbled completely. His shoulders sagged, his face crumpled, and for the first time since we were children, I saw my big brother cry. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. The confession opened the floodgates. Once Dylan started talking, everything came spilling out like water from a broken dam. He told us about losing his real job 6 months ago, about the gambling addiction he'd been hiding, about the mounting debts and the desperate attempts to maintain his lifestyle. The vacation home in Aspen? Rented for a weekend to impress a girl? The BMW? Leased with falsified income documents? The expensive condo? 2 months behind on rent. I kept thinking I could fix it, he said through tears. I kept thinking if I could just get enough money together, I could pay everything back, and nobody would ever have to know. Dad was staring at him like he was looking at a stranger. 6 months, Dylan. You've been lying to us for 6 months. I know how it sounds, but I was trying to protect you. I didn't want you to be disappointed in me. The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. Dylan, the golden child, had been so afraid of disappointing our parents that he'd committed fraud. Meanwhile, I'd been living with their disappointment my entire life and had somehow managed to become a functioning adult without turning to crime. Mom was crying now, quiet tears that spoke to a deeper pain than Dylan's dramatic sobs. How much do you owe, in total? Dylan's voice was barely audible. Including the loan from Dad? About $450,000. Dad's face went white. $450,000? Dylan, where did that money go? Gambling mostly. Some of it went to keeping up appearances, the car payments, the rent on the condo, clothes, dinners out. He looked around the room desperately. I know how it sounds, but I really thought I could win it back. I had a system. Nobody has a system for gambling, I said quietly. That's why they call it gambling. Dylan looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Emma, I never meant for Dad to get involved. I was just going to borrow the money and pay it back before anyone found out. Borrow? Dad's voice was sharp. Dylan, you didn't borrow anything. You stole. You committed identity theft and fraud. I know. But I can fix this. The loan has a grace period. If I can just get the money together for the first few payments, I can figure something out. With what money? Mom asked. You don't have a job. You don't have any income. I'll get a job. I'll get 2 jobs. I'll do whatever it takes. Dad shook his head. Dylan, even if you got a job tomorrow, do you have any idea how long it would take you to pay back $450,000? That's not counting interest, penalties, the damage to your credit score, or the legal consequences. Legal consequences? Dylan looked genuinely surprised, as if he hadn't considered that fraud was actually against the law. Yes, legal consequences, I said. Dylan, you committed a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. Identity theft, fraud, probably a dozen other charges. Dad could have you arrested. Dad wouldn't do that, Dylan said quickly, looking to our father for confirmation. Right, Dad. You wouldn't have your own son arrested. The look on Dad's face was heartbreaking. This was a man who had spent 28 years being proud of his son, bragging about Dylan's achievements to anyone who would listen. Now he was faced with the reality that those achievements were all lies, built on a foundation of deception and crime. I don't know, Dylan, Dad said finally. I honestly don't know what I'm going to do. But you have to know I never meant to hurt you, Dylan pleaded. I love you. I love this family. Everything I did because I was trying to make you proud. By lying to us? Mom's voice was stronger now, anger beginning to replace the shock. By stealing from us? By making us complicit in your crimes? You're not complicit. Nobody knows you didn't take out that loan legitimately. The bank knows, Dad said grimly. They have security footage, signatures that don't match, IP addresses. Dylan, this isn't going to just disappear. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt sorry for my brother. Not because of the consequences he was facing, but because he genuinely seemed to believe that love and good intentions could somehow erase the damage he'd caused. What happens now? I asked. Dad rubbed his temples like he was fighting off a headache. I have to call the bank tomorrow and report the fraud. Then I suppose I have to call the police. Dad, please, Dylan begged. Isn't there another way? Can't we just pay it back somehow? With what money, Dylan? I don't have $450,000 lying around. And even if I did, paying it back doesn't undo what you've done. Mom stood up suddenly, pacing to the window and staring out at the snow that was still falling. I keep thinking about Christmas dinner, she said without turning around. About the things we said to Emma. The room fell silent except for the sound of Dylan's quiet crying. We called her a burden, Mom continued, her voice thick with regret. We praised you for being successful, for making us proud, and all along you were lying to us while she was out there actually being successful, actually making a difference. She turned around to face me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Emma, I am so sorry. I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for the things I said to you. You didn't deserve that. You've never deserved the way we've treated you. I felt my own tears starting to fall. Mom, no, let me finish. You are not a burden. You never have been. You're a nurse. You save lives. You work harder than most people I know, and you do it with dignity and compassion. Meanwhile, we were so blinded by Dylan's fake success that we couldn't see the real success sitting right in front of us. Dad nodded, his own tears flowing freely now. Your mother's right. Emma, we failed you. We failed as parents, and I don't know how to fix that. You can't fix it, I said honestly. 26 years of feeling like I wasn't good enough, like I was somehow less than Dylan because I chose a different path. That doesn't just go away because you apologize. I know, Mom said, but I hope someday you can forgive us, and I hope you know that we love you, even though we did a terrible job of showing it. I looked around the room at my broken family. Dad, devastated by his son's betrayal. Mom, finally seeing the truth about both her children. And Dylan, the golden boy whose shine had finally tarnished beyond repair. I love you too, I said finally. All of you. Even Dylan, though I'm furious with him right now. But love isn't enough to fix this. We all have a lot of work to do. Dylan looked up at me with hope in his eyes. Does that mean you forgive me? It means I'm not going to let this destroy our family completely, I said. But Dylan, you need help. Real help. You need to face the consequences of what you've done, and you need to get treatment for your gambling addiction. I can do that, he said eagerly. I can get help. I can make this right. It's not about making it right, I said gently. Some things can't be made right. It's about taking responsibility and trying to be better. Dad cleared his throat. Dylan, tomorrow I'm calling the bank and reporting the fraud. I'm also calling the police. I won't press charges if you agree to enter a treatment program and make payments on the loan, but you need to understand that this is the end of the lies. Dylan nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you need me to do. And Emma, Dad turned to me. I know we have a lot of work to do to repair our relationship, but I hope you'll give us the chance to try. I thought about Sarah's words from earlier that day, about removing toxic people from your life. But I also thought about the vulnerability I'd seen in my parents' eyes tonight, the genuine remorse and the desire to do better. I'll give you the chance, I said, but things are going to be different from now on. I'm not going to sit quietly while you tear me down anymore. And I'm not going to pretend that Dylan's problems are more important than everyone else's feelings. Fair enough, Mom said. More than fair. As I drove home that night through the Colorado snow, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that my family would suddenly become perfect, but hope that we could learn to be honest with each other, even when the truth was ugly. Hope that I could finally stop carrying the weight of their expectations and disappointments. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. How did it go? I pulled over and typed back. The golden boy wasn't so golden after all. Long story. We'll tell you tomorrow. Her response came immediately. I'm proud of you for going. Want to grab drinks tomorrow and celebrate your family finally seeing what I've always seen? What's that? I typed. That you're pretty amazing exactly as you are. I smiled, wiped away the last of my tears, and drove home to my tiny apartment with my old Honda, feeling richer than I ever had when I thought I needed my family's approval to be worthy. Sometimes the best thing about being called a burden is proving that you never needed to be carried in the first place.